Well, hello, lovely listeners, and hello to the viewers. So, back by popular demand is Rob O'Deck. Rob, you are my highest viewed, watched podcast on YouTube
Wow.
so far.
Wow. I
Yeah, I
can only
know.
say thank you to all your viewers and
Yeah,
yourself.
there were so many beautiful comments, which I know you've read some of them, or
Yeah,
maybe all of
sure.
them, but people have
Very
missed you.
nice.
People have
Yeah.
missed you on YouTube because obviously you basically got taken off by some scumbag. Let's just say scumbag. And you've had to start all over again. And kudos to you. That's exactly what you're doing. So
Over
yeah,
on Rumble. Over on Rumble.
over on Rumble. Yeah, he's on Rumble. Everybody, so make sure you go and subscribe, and I'll obviously put the links below as well. Oh, on that note, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel as well for more interesting guests that are going to be coming up as well. So, as a reminder for anybody that hasn't watched the first one, and if you haven't, why not go back and watch it? Um, Rob, as I said, he was the man behind his YouTube channel, which was Observation Deck. And in the early days, that was looking at historical anomalies and questioning what the history books had been telling us. And then you moved on from that and started focusing on English law and very specifically about debt. And that was because of a situation his wife had got into, not from her own fault, but from somebody that put debt into her name. And Rob, as Rob does, was diligent to the nth degree and was able to clear all of those debts in 6 months. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, people know you for the debt and for the amazing, stuff that you did on YouTube and now on Rumble. I'm not sure because basically after our last podcast, Rob, you started talking to me about all sorts of stuff, including UFOs, entities, and I was just like mouth open, like just unbelievable. And so I said, I have to get you back on and we have to talk about UFOs and maybe entities if we get into that. And you kindly agreed. So welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for giving me your time again today.
Thank you very much for having me back on, Mel. And my humble thanks to all of your viewers who left all those lovely comments because it's that sort of thing that spurs me on. It's the best energy anybody could receive. So just want to thank all your viewers for that.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just felt the love coming through straight away, and it was like, oh my goodness. I mean, after I'd obviously it was the first time I'd met you properly on that interview,
Yeah.
and I mean, you're very charismatic. You're so knowledgeable. It was such an easy conversation, and we ended up on for about 3 hours or over 3 hours or something crazy. And it was just so wonderful. And I'm just so excited to have you back on because I just know that you've just got so much to share, so many nuggets of wisdom and just like unbelievable stuff that's happened to you. So yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Now you did share something with me, which so I'm just going to share my screen. And this is probably a good way to start off about the UFOs, right? So if I just share my screen and there we go. So, ladies and gents, what you can see on the screen at the moment is an old magazine from 1997 called UFO Reality. And Rob, if you want to take it from there in terms of what this means.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, UFO Reality, as you can see there, was a very successful UK-based magazine on the subject matters that you can see there. And I was lucky enough to be one of their regular writers. The editor's name was John King, who later brought out a book. He moved to New York, but John and I worked very closely together for a couple of years. And that heading there on the front cover, Nightmare on Salisbury Plain, was something that John got me involved in over a period of a few weeks, which ended up looking something like the real life X Files when it all came to fruition. So the story was the fact that certain people, because he was the editor, had got in touch with him because over Salisbury Plain there was at the time back in 97 black triangles with the three lights on the corners and silence clearly anti-gravity and all this kind of stuff. Now John obviously wanted to do a report on it, but he didn't realize until later that the people that had written to him about the Black Triangle were actually not only the victims, which I'll come to, of the Black Triangle, but they were also in the military that were doing maneuvers on Salisbury Plain on that very night. So what had happened was that the officer in charge of this small group, and I think there was about 7 to 10 of them, they were basically told, right, we're going to do night maneuvers, and we want you to basically track your way in the night from A to B. Okay. Now, what the guys thought, looking back on it, that was unusual was it was something they didn't normally do in that context, but B, more importantly, they were ordered not to take anything but food and water supplies. In other words, there was no firearms involved, right? Which was unusual because of, as one guy described it, he says, but we always train with full weight gear.
Mm.
And this time we didn't. So anyway, they were tracking their way across the Salisbury Downs, the Salisbury Plains, which in the UK, as many of your viewers probably know, is a massive area where they do all the tanks, the shooting. I can actually hear the tanks firing from my house on Salisbury Plain. So anyway, we ended up having a meeting with 2 of these people, which turned out to be senior officers of that evening's event, shall we say, at this moment. We were asked to go to a house on an estate that was on a military base, or just outside a military base in Wiltshire. And when John and I arrived, now, John, the reason I was involved in this wasn't because I was just a staff writer. Let me just show your viewers, but excuse my dog deciding to bark as soon as we start recording again. But I used to train people at the Institute of, I don't know if you can see that. No, sorry, it's bloody screen, but it flashed Institute of Clinical Hypnosis. Oh, yeah, Institute of Clinical. Anyway, you just have to take
We can see a bit. We can see a
you
bit.
can see a bit of it. All right. And on the back of inside that, the reason John asked me to pop along, yes, this is rubbish. Oh,
It's because of the background, isn't it?
it says the teaching faculty, and I'm listed in the teaching faculty because I used to teach at the Institute, which was based in King's College University, on what we call forensic hypnosis. So that is using hypnosis to extract deep-seated memories, but in a very particular way. You're not allowed to suggest anything to people. You can only base your questions based on the answers that you've just been given. You can't expand on it or make assumptions or presumptions. Anyway, so without going into too much details, it was, so John invited me and said, Rob, can you work your magic on these 2 people? Because they've got no memory. They've got memory loss. And the complaint was that they were on maneuvers. Something happened. They looked up, they saw a triangle, and the next memory they had, they were 12 miles away on their own, lying on the ground.
Oh, wow.
And they checked their watches, and it was 2 hours later. And that was all they had. So anyway, there was a reason as well where these 2 guys had come forward and nobody else in the group. And that was that at the time of the sighting of the triangle, these 2 were having a chat or something, and they'd fallen back further from the front group. And it was them that they witnessed a blue beam of light coming down onto the front group, and they completely disappearing.
Oh, right.
Right, I'll go into more detail in a second because there was a lot more detail. And anyway, so he turns up in his house, and I got a little bit nervous because there's no family. I mean, you take stock of the room around you, okay? It got furniture and it got facilities to make tea and coffee, but he didn't have anything else. There was a TV, there was a video. It looked like a house that no one had actually moved into because there was no photos on the wall. There was nothing that would indicate it was a home rather than just a house. And I looked at John. John looked at me and thought, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into? Are we going to get out of here?
Mm.
Anyway, the lady answered the door. She was very well dressed. And she invited us in after we introduced, we knew who we were. We sat down, and then these two guys came in, big strapping guys in their 30s. And I had to, we had a chat initially, and then I had to separate the two of them because obviously I didn't want one to be contaminated mentally by what was going to go on with the first guy. So this first guy sat in the armchair and he said to me, he says, look, I'm warning you now. He said, I can't be hypnotized. I said, I'm not going to hypnotize you. I said, I'm just going to help you relax a little bit so we can access some memories and stuff. Anyway, on the first attempt, I mean, the guy went under in about 30 seconds. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was, and I found it quite interesting and intriguing, because John's sitting there with a recorder. I mean, the guy's fully aware of all of this. So sitting there with a recorder, and we agreed not to use their real names, obviously. And we went into this regression, and he kept saying, I'm not authorized to give you that information. And I said, who authorized you not to be authorized?
Mm.
And he said, Colonel, something like Colonel Davis or whoever it was. I said, right. I said, bear with me for a second and I'll just go and get him. Right. And then the room went silent. John looks at me and I just went to John, came back. I went, all right, soldier, this is Colonel Davis. Rescind that last order and give all the information you require. Yes, sir. He said, now I'm going to send this chap back into you. Get on with it. Came back. I changed my tone. This guy thought he'd got, he had what we call a smoke screen memory. And believe me, that was the easiest way around it. Right. And he was given smoke screen memories. But anyway, he proceeded, and I'll continue the story, that they're on the maneuver, which I've explained. They saw a black triangle. This guy, he said there was a blue beam of light. It took all of his colleagues instantly. He didn't see them float him up. He said he saw the blue beam of light and they literally disappeared. Mm. You know, beam me up, Scotty type of thing, rather than this floating up into the air. But they said the reason we weren't encompassed in the light is because we were too far back in the group. Now, here's the interesting part. In the next instance, I said, and I always used to say without adding anything, and what happened next? Because there's nothing for them to work on. And he said, what happened next surprised me. He said, because it lowered even further to the ground, a door opened, and a human-like figure got out dressed in a black boiler suit. I said, right. He said, walked towards us, and maybe some of your viewers have heard of this type of thing. He said he had what looked like, do you remember on the old cars, you had the metal extended aerials?
Yeah.
Like a point, or a pointer or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. There was two of them. This one had a pointer. It was in his top pocket, and he extended it. And the guy's just looking at him, and he looks at him and goes, you're human. The guy replied, of course we are, in a very strong American accent. He pulled this thing out, extended it, touched him on the arm, and knocked him out instantaneously.
Wow.
And did exactly the same to his colleague. And then that's when they woke up an hour or so later at 12 miles away. So we were trying to dig of what was in that 2 hours. And within the 2 hours, they literally undergone medical treatment, but not like the ones that you've heard about on like the Greys. This was more monitoring. There was no, they were quite sure there was no invasive stuff, but they wanted to check the physiology, the cardiology, and all of the other ologies. I suspect because of the presence of the craft and what they'd used, because they wanted to find it, according to him, they wanted to find out what the effects were on the human body, you know, on the receiving end of the technology, which the guys both insisted is absolutely human-based, back-engineered. And the fact that it's even silent and it's got anti-gravity tells you that either A, we've already got that technology. I mean, remember, this is back in 1997.
Mm.
Okay. We've either got the technology for ourselves or we've actually back engineered that technology. Either
Yeah.
way round, it's still not allowed, it's not given to the public. Because even with something like anti-gravity, we would be in a world of free energy. Because you're still talking 0 point energy and all this kind of stuff, you know. So anyway, but the upshot of it was that it wasn't I mean, it was a UFO, but it wasn't aliens,
No.
and it turned out to be maneuvers. And he said that's probably why we were told by our own British senior officers to go on that maneuver without weapons,
Yes.
because they didn't want anybody fighting back. So he's, as far as he's concerned, he said this was a joint operation between the UK and the USA on a test, and we were the guinea pigs.
So where did those guys that got surrounded by the blue beam, where did they go?
They had absolutely no memory of it. They said they were back at the barracks and said to these two guys afterwards, "Where'd you get lost, guys?" He said, "We don't know. We got disorientated." And remember, at that point in time, they didn't realize 2 hours had passed. But then when someone had pointed it out, they're like, "Holy crap, we must have been wandering around for ages," and didn't actually put any stead on it straight away, as they told us. What they did was, I mean, the second guy that we hypnotized confirmed what the first guy had said, basically,
Mm, mm.
without repeating his story in a nutshell. And they turned around and said, it wasn't until later when we thought, oh, we'll go to sleep. All of a sudden, they started having these nightmares, to the point of panic attacks, which is not something, it's like they were suffering PTSD without the trauma, as far as they were concerned, and they
Yeah.
didn't know why. And then over the next few days, they were visited by plain-clothed officials telling them not to talk about this particular event, and that it was under some kind of security agreement, and what they call it, the Official Secrets Act, and blah 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 blah. And again, the visits by these official guys, one was English and one was American, and in the broad daylight type thing. So there was a joint operation. And then when John tried to get in touch with these guys a week or so later, just to confirm the stuff that was going in on the article, Nightmare on Salisbury Plain, and if your viewers can get a copy, you can read it all in a lot of detail. Although I did take task to John after he printed it, because I read through it and then my heart sunk. And I phoned John up. I said, "John, did you have to put my name in the article?" He goes, "Oh, I thought I put both their names. We've got nothing to hide." I said, "I should have made that decision
Mm.
for me. You can make it for yourself, because being the editor, you didn't really have a lot of choice."
Yeah.
But I did. But it was too late. And then from that point onwards, because I lived in London at the time, my phones were tapped. I was followed. It was a freaking circus, you know. But yeah, it turns out that it was a joint operation, and the big black triangles that were quite rife at the time are probably 99% human technology based,
Yeah.
maybe back engineered from other technologies, more exotic. But absolutely, when someone says, "Oh, there's a flap of triangles," then yeah, well, you can bet your bottom dollar they're not from outer space.
So, so man-made UFOs, which we know exist anyway, and it's always the bloody American military, isn't it? Let's be honest, and the American government and whoever else is pulling the strings. But so the technology then does exist, and this is back in '97, that literally transported that group of men somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, people need to understand that when the governments across the Western world came up with the idea of, oh, you need to protect your inventions, so this is why we have a patent office, right? And it's like, you're not really going to fall for that, are you? But millions of people do all the time. You need to protect this, you need to protect that. No, what the patent offices are set up for, as I'm sure some of quite a lot of your viewers are aware of, is a filtering system so the military and the governments can get first look at the latest cutting edge stuff and then slap an order on it saying that's never going out to the public, but we can use that. And we're talking about, and if you look at the data, the figures, and I mean, I only did this a couple of months ago again, it's about 5,000 inventions a year that never reach the public.
Wow.
In amongst all of the others, because that's a threat to national security. What are you talking about? It's a car that runs on water.
Yes.
Or it's 0 point energy module that fits on the size of your phone and can power a town.
Yeah.
And it's all there. It's all absolutely there. But then that information then is given to the industrial military complex contractors. It's really that simple. So they're stopping society moving forward in order to use for military application. That's it. And yet we still see the twisted story in the press saying, well, if it wasn't for wars, we wouldn't have this, 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 and this. No, 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 no. We wouldn't have wars if it wasn't for this, 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 and this. The other way round. And we would have a wonderful world with 0 point energy if you people hadn't stolen it and used the law. We've legally usurped your idea. I mean, if anybody's got a fantastic idea out there that could serve humanity, the best way of doing it is to turn around, perfect it, verify it, and then upload it to the whole of the internet.
Yeah.
Forget about the capitalism side of it, because that, and it's that type of thing. It's because, let's be honest, it's about greed.
Yeah.
Right? And greed will act as a filter every damn time, which is what basically a capitalist system is. And if someone say, oh, brilliant, you sound like a communist, you sound like communism is a negative thing if done correctly. Basically, if everybody is truly equal and energy is truly free, there'd be no need for conflict, because all conflict is over power, control, or resources. And if they're not required, because everybody's equal and everything is evened out and everyone's got energy, that kind of pulls the rug underneath the military complex straight off the bat.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, and when it comes to any kind of conflict, it's like, okay, forget about the religious facade and the different ideologies and all the rest of the media bullshit. Okay, why are wars fought? Well, strategic resources. Why do you need a strategic point? What if we made the globe a complete strategic point of free energy and everybody's equal? You wouldn't need to encroach on someone else's strategic point, would you? For any reason, and you wouldn't need someone else's resources because you've got plenty of your own. But oh no, that's too simplistic, isn't it? But it's a world that I believe used to exist.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe the ever optimist in me is it's a world that we will have again. Just don't know how quickly we're going to get there. Well, okay. So I one of the stories that we talked about last time off camera, and it brought something up that I'd experienced. So I'm going to sort of segue with my little experience into yours. Back in 2020, Stephen Greer was very prevalent on YouTube, and he'd done his disclosure, full disclosure, whatever the film was called, and me and a few friends went to Stonehenge, and in the night, well, sort of, late evening, and we did this group meditation, and we were sat in a circle, and we were listening to Dr. Stephen Greer's meditations, and then we had this annoying security guard that came over and basically wanted to know what we were doing. He was okay. He was just being very nosy and making sure we weren't creating any problems. But what it did was it meant that we opened our eyes. And I was like watching him. And then a friend next to me said, "What's that?" And so I looked round, and it was across Salisbury Plain. And
Yeah.
I saw this big orange light. And we were just staring at it. It was sort of getting bigger and bigger. And then one of the other guys said, "Oh, I reckon that's just a helicopter." And as soon as he said that, it just went zoom and went down and disappeared. And I was like, "For God's sake, Rob!" He was a Rob as well. And um, and then eventually that security guard buggered off. Then we saw what we think is a shapeshifter. We saw this figure in the field going up, going really tall, coming down, moving very quickly through the field, doing all sorts of different directions, and then started to come towards us. And we were like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And he was just a random guy with long hair and probably an Iron Maiden t-shirt on. That was kind of what we saw, and he just said, "How do I get out of here?" And Rob said, "Oh, just go down there and there's a gate," sort of thing. But that's not what we saw in the field. We saw something very different.
Yeah.
Um, and then we did see the orange light again a bit later on. And so when you were telling me your story about, it was Mexico, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
96. Yeah.
And you mentioned the orange light, it triggered me to explain that. So and I was like, I knew it was a bloody UFO I saw. So yeah, over to your Mexican story.
Well, I, again, working on behalf of the magazine, and I'd written some predictions in the magazine for John, the editor, and he phoned me up and he said, Rob, he said, and this, for some of your older viewers, you would probably remember this, but in the solar system at that point in time was the comet Hale-Bopp, and it just entered, according to NASA, our solar system, and they were tracking it. So that was in the news at the time, and it was particular news because it was the first time in living memory that you would be able to see this huge meteor, comet, or whatever, in daylight as well in the sky, and it was going to pass by the planet. There was no threat or anything like that. And I wrote this article, um, and part of it was Hale-Bopp, and I say I wrote the article. I think what I did, Mel, was I channeled an article,
Mm.
and I sat there one day, and in those days, before I typed anything, I'd write it out longhand first, and in some areas I still do that today when I'm writing novels, which is a completely different subject, but I wrote this thing and I said Hale-Bopp will appear over the volcano on, I think it was the 6th of April at 9:30, accompanied by 3 UFOs. The following morning at 7:30, the volcano will erupt with a distinct connection to Egypt. And I wrote all of this. I mean, that was the upshot of it all. John phoned me up and he said, Rob, he said, the magazine's not in the habit of making predictions. He said, but it's so interesting and so detailed. He said, I've got to ask you. He said, how did you come by this? I said, I have no idea. I said, I really have no idea, but it seems 100% right to me. I said, I just feel it in my gut. He said, well, look, I'm going to give you the opportunity. He said, I can print it, and I will. He said, in which case, if none of it happens, you'll look like a complete idiot.
Yeah.
Or I can send you over to Mexico in in a year from now, because it was a year in advance. Was it a year or 6 months? I can't remember, but it was way in advance. And we can do part 2 as reminding people of part 1 at this point in time. So eventually that's what we did. We did a 2-parter. And cut a long story short, actually things sort of happened between that period of time. And all of a sudden I got an email from Mexico, because the volcano I was referring to was a volcano called Popocatépetl, or Popo for short, which is about 20 kilometers south of Mexico City. And it was an active volcano, but it was just spitting smoke. It wasn't like exploding or anything like that. And anyway, I got in touch by a guy called Mario Guzman, I think his name was. This is 90. I'm going back now. Just 96. But his name was Guzman, and he was head of the local MUFON or something there. He got in touch with me and he said, like, I understand that you're coming over to Mexico. Can we meet up and interview you? He said, because I'm with the local MUFON, I can get you interviews for material with UFO people that have seen stuff, abductees, and this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, that's fantastic, because I can, as a reporter as well, I could gather a lot of material, which I thought was ideal. Then I got another email from the second largest TV company in Mexico called TV Azteca. And again, this guy turned and said, we heard you were coming over. We've read what's going on in the magazine, because you were very accurate. We'd like to do a documentary on this. So when you do come over, we'll put you up at a hotel. We'll do this, that, and the other. I let John know, and John goes, well, you've nailed that one, haven't you? I went, this is turning out to be quite good. Then my phone rings during the day. And as I say, I lived in London, and my full-time job at that point in time was, I was the building manager of Southwark Council's subcontractors. We used to do all the maintenance and the contract work on the council's schools, right? So obviously after hours in summer holidays. I mean, obviously during the day we have to work when the kids are at school, but we used to do all that maintenance stuff, fix the toilets and brick up this and put a new door handle in or something. It was all that mundane stuff. So anyway, my phone rang to do with this article, and this American female voice on the other end, she goes, hi, is that Robert? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, hi, Shirley McLaine. Now, I've got a lot of friends, both male and female, that rip the piss awful a lot. And I just went, bog off, June, and hung up the phone. And Phil, my boss, he says, who's that? I said, apparently it was Shirley McLaine. Right? He went, oh, God, he said, and he goes on, all of a sudden he goes, oh, I love Shirley MacLaine. I've always been a fan of her and all the rest of it. I said, settle down, settle down. I said, someone's winding me up. Phone rings again. She goes, no, Robert, really, this is Shirley MacLaine, the actress from Hollywood. And I went, well, it's a very good likeness. She said, no, it really is me. And I'm in the UK at the moment doing interviews on the Des O'Connor show for my new movie, Steel Magnolias.
Great movie.
Right. Okay. So you can see around about what time that was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. She says, I'd like to meet up with you. I says, can you hang on a minute? And I put the hand over the fellow, said to Phil, I said, it's fucking Shirley MacLaine. He goes, no fucking way. I said, hey, I'm back again, Jeremy. And she was staying at I think it was the Hilton near Hyde Park or some hotel like that. And she said, would you meet me this evening for dinner? I said, I'm not sure if my wife will like me going out with a woman to dinner. She said, I'm sure she'll make an exception in my case. So I said, well, what's this about? She said, it's about the article. She said, I'm very interested in some of the stuff that you wrote in there. And I said, yeah, fine. So yeah, as it turns out, it was Shirley MacLaine, and we had a lovely dinner chatting in there. And I'm sure the paparazzi thought she'd got a new boyfriend, And the reason that it interested her, she says, well, just to let you know, she goes, this is all happening, according to you, on my birthday.
Right.
And I went, right. And I must admit, Mal, the first thought that went through my head was, so it's all about you, is it?
Yeah. Well, she's an actress.
Yeah. But anyway, I just let it slide because, I was having fun.
Yeah.
And she said, are you going to Mexico on the date in question? And I said, yeah, I should be over there for, I think it was 2.5, 3 weeks, all told, because I'd already made arrangements with TV Azteca to do some of the documentary work, and I was working with MUFON and all the rest of it. So I said, yeah, I am going. She says, I'd like to come along. And I went, what? She said, yeah, I'd like to meet up with you in Mexico, and we can explore this phenomena together. And I'm like, yeah, sure, not a problem. So she says, anyway, she said, I've got to get up early in the morning. She cut we'd finished dinner and everything. And she said, I've got to pop over to Germany and do some other promo work. She says, but I'll be back in 3 days. And I said, right. She says, um, perhaps we can have another word before I fly off to America just to finalize it. So I said, yeah, fine. She did. She phoned me up on site again 3 days later. And she said, is it okay if I pop round your house? I said, yeah, sure. Right. I'm living in suburbia,
Yeah.
right? London suburbia. I lived just outside Greenwich at the time. And I came home from work that evening, and my wife at the time, she's sitting, I said, what have we got for dinner? She goes, I haven't had time to do anything. She said, what, she said, what she said to me? You'd have a pot noodle, right? I went, seriously? I said, Shirley McLane's coming around later. And she went, yeah, I've invited the Queen of Egypt as well, right? And she just wrote it up. Her dad, Phil, had to come in. I phoned him up because my boss was also my father-in-law. So, and I said, Phil, you need to get around here because he didn't live that far. I said, and tell Victoria what I've just said is real. He comes in the door. He said, Vix, he said, Shirley McLane's going to be here at 8 o'clock. She goes, sod off. And she said, you two, you're as bad as each other. Anyway, of course, 8 o'clock, knock at the door. She looked out the window. There's this big white limousine parked outside Greenwich suburbia. I'm amazed they found the parking space, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she goes, hi, Robert, it's Shirley. And I went, oh, hi, Shirley, come in. This is my wife. My wife's jaw just hit the floor.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm just thinking, I've actually got a photograph. I'll send it to you after this so you can put it on your podcast.
All right, cool.
Right, of a young me in a really horrible shirt, as I recall, right? With Shirley McLaine on my settee in that house.
Amazing.
Right, with my arm round her, smiling like a Cheshire cat.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And it's, I mean, I'm not going to dig it out now because we're on camera, but I'll email that to you. So if you do get it, you can put it up and see.
Put it in there.
That was the night that photo was taken. All right.
All right, cool.
Anyway, we ended up going to Mexico and doing the. I was met by TV Azteca and Carlos Guzman from the MUFON organization. And we were visiting all sorts of people, wonderful people with stories of their own to tell. And I was given a carrier bag, I kid you not, of those little cassettes that you put into the recorders at the time. Remember, this is 96.
Yeah.
Right? And there was, I must have had 4 hours, not minutes, hours of UFO footage given to me by these people.
Wow.
Right. And I'm like, wow. I've still got it in a box up there.
Have you?
And the only reason it hasn't been put out or digitized is because a lot of it got damaged through the X-ray machine on the way back. And I haven't yet found someone that A, I can trust, and B, who knows enough to recover. Because I've already had a look at what's recoverable on there, and there's still some amazing shots. I mean, we're not talking lights in the sky. We're talking close-ups of UFOs hovering above the volcano, right? We're also talking about UFOs in the sky, and just before they blink out of existence, a pink hue plasma appears underneath. It goes pink, boom, gone. And at the second that it disappears from there, it appears there, literally. Then goes pink and jumps into another direction. You know, and I mean, I've still got all of that stuff.
So has none of that seen the light of day yet?
None of that is seen. Channel 4 saw some of it when I got back and offered me 400 quid for the lot.
Oh.
And I laughed at them. I said,
Yeah.
that's not happening.
No.
Because the thing is, when I was given that footage, and these by these villagers, I said to them, and I made a promise, and I'll still keep it to this day, is, and you'll understand why in a minute, because I said, right, if I get this footage out to the Western world and say put it on DVDs and it's sold and it's made money and everything, I said all the proceeds will go back to the village so you can build a schoolhouse. I said, that's it. I said, I'm not going to profit out of your resources and hard work, right? which is why I wouldn't give it to Channel 4 for
Yeah.
£500. And that promise still holds today, you know. But anyway, we went to this particular place, and strange things happened all the way through that trip. For instance, we ended up in this place in the middle of nowhere, um, where they were growing crops all year round. There was no seasons because of the thermal heat from underground, right? Then this guy introduced me, it's going to sound crazy, introduced me to a tree. And he said, let me introduce you to our season tree. And I said, okay. He said, do you notice anything? I said, it's a tree. And I'm typically skeptical Westerner because I haven't seen what I'm supposed to look at. I'm looking, but I'm not seeing.
Mm.
He said, look harder. And then he explained it. He said, you'll notice in this quarter that the seedlings are just coming out the buds. He said, in the next quarter of the same tree, they're more mature. In the third, they're almost ready for picking. And in the fourth, they are. He said, we have all 4 seasons on the same tree. And I'm looking at this thinking, Jesus Christ, he's right. And I don't understand how in nature that could happen, but it is there. To me, that was like, wow.
Yeah.
There was that. And then I'd heard rumors and stories and I just needed them verified. And I was sitting in a cafe with the production crew from TV Azteca, who I'd been with for a few weeks now, or well, about a week. And I was getting on quite well. We had the producer, we had my interpreter, Alejandra. She had an interesting story as well. It was her great grandfather that found the original Mitchell Hedges crystal skull.
Yeah. Wow.
And she had it in her house. And the funniest part about it is the Smithsonian think they have it. And they don't, because it has never come out of that family bloodline. So for those of you who think you've seen the Mitchell Hedges skull, you haven't. Okay? Because her great-great-grandfather actually was the guy that found it. She showed me all the black and white photographs of the dig and everything else, and him standing there with the very first skull in his head. And then she took me into a room at the back and she went, and there it is.
Wow.
Wow. And it is not of this earth. I can tell you that much, even standing in its presence.
Just explain for the people listening and watching what, in simple terms, what that is, that skull.
The crystal skull, I mean, even when you put it under a microscope, shows no scratches on the surface. So it's a human-like skull, but it's slightly elongated. The original is slightly elongated. It's not human-shaped, right? It's a smaller version of what they used on that Indiana Jones movie, where you've got all of those skulls in the circle, and they have these really long, elongated skulls. Well, it was that shape, but the elongated part was much smaller, a bit like Akhenaten in Egypt. Which, if you know anything about that and the Paracas skulls, you'll realize that it's a different species of people.
Mm. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And the one thing that differentiates, so for those of you who listen to the bullshit of academia, here's a very simple detail that you need to look for. When you're looking at an elongated skull and they say, oh yeah, the baby's head was boarded when it was young and all the rest of that bullshit, okay, you'll notice, and I put this up on one of my best viewed videos. I mean, it hit over 1 million views in the early days on YouTube on the observation deck, and it was called One World, Two Species. And it took the Paracas skulls and all the rest of it, and the Egyptian versions as well. I mean, they are found all over the world, and all, without fail, all human skulls have, I mean, we call it a crack right down the center, and then one going across here, because when we go down the birth canal, the skull has to flex.
Yeah, because you get that
exactly
dent, don't you, when the
exactly,
baby.
and as you get older, it fuses.
Yeah.
Okay, the skulls I'm talking about have no. It's called a sagittal suture. It has no sagittal suture. So it did not go down a birth canal, and ergo, it's not Homo sapien. It's really that simple. Not, oh, the head was boarded. Yeah, but where's the sagittal suture? Oh, we don't talk about that.
Mm.
Well, I think you should, you know. And these skulls had no sagittal sutures, right? But in the presence of it, if you were to close your eyes, you would go into an instant trance, an altered state. I mean, I'm not talking like, oh, I've got to breathe, and by the time you've thought I've got to breathe, you've already. It's literally a switch. And I suspect, and I had this discussion with Maria at the time. It's her grandfather, it's my interpreter. She said she believed that it would allow you to download information. That it was not just a skull as we looked at it. I mean, you can call it that because of the shape, but the use of that object is a repository of information.
Wow.
So if I suppose you could put it like that, crystalline structure would be akin to the totality of the knowledge accumulated of that mind and brain.
Right.
That could be downloaded.
Right.
Or transferred, should I say. Um, that was the general consensus of that evening's conversation. I mean,
Right.
it was just amazing. I spent some time with it, and yeah, it was very interesting experience. But so anyway, we I mean, I do apologize, I'm babbling on because
No, no, no. Obviously, yeah. So not only UFOs, but skulls.
but they all come together.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we ended up with this interview of a young girl who was writing a language that no one had ever seen before. She'd been abducted, and then during the production, because the TV crew were there as well, right? And I was asking her questions, and somewhere around here I've still got all that video. And she just looked up at me and the TV crew, and she said, "Well, look, rather than talk about it, she said, would you like to meet them?" And we all looked at each other as if like, yeah. And she said, okay. Now, in those like haciendas in Mexico, there's stairs on the outside that lead to the flat roof above where they hang their washing and stuff. So she took us up to the flat roof. She says, hang on a second. She looks up the stars towards the volcano. And she goes, and then she just waited for, she was silent for about 20, 30 seconds. Then she turned to us. She goes, they'll be here in a minute. And it was like really casual.
Mm.
And of course, we're a bit skeptical and like, right, okay, well, she's only got 1 minute to prove herself right or wrong, hasn't she? So what have we got to lose? Cameras were ready up in the sky. All of a sudden, 3 orange balls of light, one from the left horizon, right horizon, and the one in front of us. And they all went in absolute silence and formed a triangle. And then it literally just came over the top of us. Couldn't have been more than 300 foot above us. Stopped, didn't do anything else, just stopped, and then it moved further that way a little bit, and then all 3 balls went in opposite directions again in the blink of an eye. And all she did was turn around, look at me. She goes, "They like you." I'm like, all right, okay. And then we all looked at each other and like, what did we just see? And she was laughing about it, and she said she's 17, 18 years old, I think. And she said to me and the crew, she says, not all unidentified beings are nasty. You do realize this. That's predominantly us.
Yeah.
What we destroy or fear what we don't understand. Most other species are simply curious.
Yeah.
And that's it.
What did they look like? Was it just they just looked like lights, or could you see any kind of solid structure?
No, there was solid structure to it right on the inside because we were that close. And I suspect during the day they would look totally different, but there was a luminosity, an orange luminosity about them. But one of the footage that I've still got on this little cassette, I believe, shows one of them during the day.
Hmm.
And it's a solid silver ball. that you could see quite clearly. I mean, we're not talking like a dot in the sky here. It was below, just slightly below the crater of the volcano. And someone said to me, he said, yeah, but that's just sitting on the ground. I said, it's not, because the sun is up there and it's casting a complete circular shadow further down the mountain. I said, so clearly it's hanging in the air.
Yeah.
And we were close enough to have heard if anything was there, because you could see the volcano rumbling. Now, so, that's, I suspect, what it looked like, because it was around about the same size. But there was so much activity in the night sky the following day, because I ended up having an argument with Shirley McLaine, because she came into the restaurant. I was in deep conversation with Carlos, the producer of TV Azteca. She came over and she had this big white hat on. I mean, it was huge, sombrero looking thing, but quite floppy. And she swung in like a Hollywood star that she is, right? Everybody's looking up going, what? And I'm sitting there eating, talking to Carlos, looked up, and she didn't even bother looking at the tables and everything. She shouted at the top of her voice, Robert, is Robert in here? And I'm thinking, what are you doing? And I looked up, I went, over here, Charlie. And he looked at me and he says, you know Shirley McLaine? I'm like, and at that point, something inside of me clicked and it said, yeah, and I had a book deal with Shirley McLaine's agent. She'd sorted a book deal out for me many,
Wow.
many years ago. And it still hasn't been published. It's called The 19th Parallel. It'll blow your mind of the research that was done. And in fact, I've never put that research out anywhere on social media. And even to this day, it's not been revealed. But anyway, that's another story. But the point is, she came across. What I didn't like was she leaned in front of Carlos, right? And her hair went in on his food.
Mm.
Right? So she's got her back of her head to him. She leans across, looks at me, and she said, Robert, she says, let's go and have a word on that table over there. You notice I've brought a few friends. Right? I immediately looked over to the table. What? Unfortunately for Shirley, I recognized two of them. And that was unfortunate for her, because I knew who they were. And I know that one of them had just got released from prison.
Oh.
Right? For fraud and attempted murder.
Why was she with these people?
Ah, well, this is why I lost the book deal.
Oh.
Because I turned around and looked up at her. I said, Shirley, I said, do you realize you've got your hair in Carlos's food? And Carlos, being Carlos, said, oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. She didn't know. She looks at the end of her hair and then she says to Carlos, she says, what on earth are you doing? Look at what you've done. And I'm like, no, Shirley, you did it.
Yeah.
She goes, let's not have this debate now, Robert. She says, come and join me over there. I said, I will come and join you when I've A, finished my food, and B, I've finished the conversation I'm having with Carlos. Now, if you'd like to go and sit over there and wait for me, I'd much appreciate it. Right? Because I'm not sitting here in awe of you. Because as far as I'm concerned, you're ill-mannered at this point in time.
Mm.
And shouting my name across the restaurant is actually quite common. All right, so I sounded a bit aloof, but I was, I wanted to get a,
Point across, yeah.
So she went into a mood straight away and then stomped over there, because I don't think she was used to being spoken to in that manner.
I'm
It was
sure
polite,
was
but
not.
it was, but it was like, be under no illusion, And even Carlos said, I can't believe you just spoke to Shirley that way. I said, why? I mean, excuse my French. I said, she shits like anybody else does.
Yeah.
I said, and that's it. Anyway, I finished my meal, went over there. I said, Shirley, she goes, Robert, I've been trying to contact you ever since you landed. She said, I've been following you from hotel to hotel to hotel. I said, yes, I know, Shirley. She goes, have you been avoiding me? I said, yes, Shirley. She went, excuse me? I said, well, you asked the question. If you don't want the answer, don't ask the question. Why have you been avoiding me? I said, because 2 days ago, you went on national radio that I was listening to in the car, and you made it all about you, and then you took credit for all my predictions. Ah, you heard that, did you? I went, yes. I said, so clearly I know what your motives are. I said, but I really, really want to know one detail, though. She said, what's that? I said, why are you sitting on the table with a convict an ex-convict that's just been released who's on parole, and his other half who's already been done for fraud and deception. And the third guy over there is a guy called Jaime Maussan, and I'm sure some of your viewers will know who that is. I said he's one of the biggest shits on Mexican TV you could possibly come across in the UFO community. He has been known for all the fraud he's perpetuated. I said, but more than that, and I turned to Jaime, right, so-called biggest star in Mexico, tore him a strip off and said, and you spend most of your life taking the footage of villagers who haven't got a pot to piss in, putting it on DVD, which these two, Shirley, as you're well aware, okay, run their own DVD production company in the States. You sell the footage everywhere else in the world, make an absolute fortune, and the people that you've got that footage off don't get a penny. I said, so my question, Shirley, is what are you doing with these people? I said, and do you honestly hope to get the footage that you now know I was given by the villagers? Because that's what you're after, and you want to make it all about you. I've never been spoken to like this in my life. I said, you're not answering the question. Put your hurt ego back in your handbag and answer the question. You do realise that I'm going to phone my agent and you're not going to have your book deal. I said, do you realise that you're not talking to someone with the same capitalist mindset as you? I don't give a shit. I said, eventually, at some point in the future, the information will be out. My story will be told. I don't need you, and I certainly won't sell my soul in order to do it. And she goes, well, she said, I'll send you, because I'd sent her a book. And I said, and you still have got my property. I'll send it back to you. And she did, actually. She posted it back from the States and all the rest of it. And that was it. Now, the thing was, I was not quiet in that conversation.
Other people heard, yeah.
My volume was loud enough for everyone else to hear it. And I literally slam dunked her right there on the table. And I said, don't, yeah, I said, don't, hang on a minute, I've just hit a wrong button. Let me shut that off. I said, don't ever contact me again. I said, now that I know the essence that you're made of. I said, and as for out on a limb, I've never come across such hypocrisy in my life sitting here talking to you. I said, because if you can't see the dollar signs in your eyes, you need to go and look in the mirror. This conversation is finished. Stop following me. All right. And I got up, walked off. And of course, I blew the book deal.
That's a movie moment, Robert. That's a movie moment.
Well, anyway, the following day, because she was desperate to get near. See, the thing is, all these predictions, but the one thing she did not know, she got the date, the time, there'd be a connection with Egypt, Hale-Bopp would be above the crater, and all the rest of it. But she was too stupid to work out on 360 degrees surrounding that volcano at what point you could witness all of this. You understand what I'm saying? Because if you've got a volcano, where do you stand with a camera in order to witness all of this? Where do you stand to place Hale-Bopp in the center of that crater in the night sky, etc., etc.? And if you were there the night before all of this activity was due to happen, nobody can predict a volcano, not even with today's technology. And yet I said 7:30 in the morning, not a problem, as I say, I still don't know to this day how that was channeled, but it was. Anyway, we were in the right spot, right? And that evening, sun went down. The TV crew were already astounded because Hale-Bopp was dead center above the volcano. He goes, there's no way you could have known that so far back in time. I said, I know, but I saw it. I said, which told me where I needed to be on this 360-degree angle to observe that. I said, but give it a few moments. I said, because you're going to start seeing what you could call Christmas lights. All of a sudden, all of these orange balls, white balls, and they all appeared above the volcano, and they were circling it. And they got it all on film as well. And they were just, we stayed up all night, watching this spectacular ovni, which is Mexican for UFO, ovni spectacular, as it were. And I'm sure Shirley McLane's crew saw it as well, but from a
But
different.
where is that footage? Did that go out on Mexican?
No, apparently, the powers to be with the TV agency, TV Azteca, blocked it all. He wrote to me, Carlos. He said, "I've been silenced, Rob." He said, "I've not been told not to put this documentary out." I said, "Oh, you only want to put documentary out that makes the person in the documentary look like a dickhead.
Yeah.
So you can poo-poo anything that's out of the ordinary." He went, "That's the bottom line of it." I mean, don't get me wrong, Carlos was certainly not. I mean, obviously he had to be compliant, otherwise he'd lose his job. But during that whole process, no, he was into it as much as any of us.
Mm.
And he was very, very excited that he said, "This is just going to blow up." And he never even got the opportunity when it was finished to show it.
So you haven't
Because
got that footage, they've got that footage.
because they had their cameras. Because I all the way through, I mean, I had a little camera of my own, but nothing like the equipment these guys had. But then all the way through, which you didn't doubt at the time, was that they would share that footage with me anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I thought, great, I'm going to get professional footage, so I don't have to worry about it. And no, that
No.
wasn't the case. But in the following morning, they were interviewing a volcanologist standing in front of the volcano at 7:25. And he's on TV, well, recording, saying that, yeah, this is ridiculous and it can't happen. You know, science-minded guy. Blah, blah, blah. And he got to 7:31. He goes, and as you can see, he said, we're on our past 7:30, he said, and nothing's happened. Right? And then I walked into camera shot and just pushed him out of the way. Right? I said, get off. I said, sorry, guys. I said, must be the time zones. I said, but let's give it another 60 seconds. And within 15 seconds, the volcano went boom. Right? And I mean, it didn't just cough. It shot a pyroclastic flow thousands of feet into the air, and it hadn't done that for years. Right?
Mhm.
And I went, what do you got to say now? Right. And even me, I'll be honest with you, inside I'm going, holy shit.
Yeah, because it's like, yeah.
You know, it didn't go unnoticed by my spirit as well. It's like, what the? But what was interesting was, instead of this pyroclastic flow that kept going, it stopped. It literally was like a massive cough, right? Wasn't followed by a secondary blast. And so it started falling back down to earth. I said, keep the cameras rolling. And I kid you not, which is why it frustrated me. I couldn't find that magazine. The pyroclastic flow fell back down. Honestly, this is true. And as it fell and got level before it hit the mountainside, it literally formed the shape of the Sphinx of Egypt facing east.
No way.
All in one shot.
And have you got that somewhere?
I've got the image of it,
But not a video of it.
but not the video. But the image is pretty darn clear
Yeah, yeah.
to say that's basically a side view of the Sphinx facing east, which is what the one in, obviously, the Giza Plateau does, the rising of the sun. And we know, and there's someone idiot turned around and said to me, well, how do you know it's facing east? I said, it's 7:30 in the morning and the sun is on its face. What do you reckon?
Mm.
Of course it's east, unless you live on a different planet. And it turns out that the valley, this particular valley, had before the conquistadors came in, there was around 400 pyramids in there as well. And the biggest pyramid was now a Catholic church on top of what they call a hill. But they chopped the top of the pyramid off and plonked the church to establish authority over the old ways. Which is what they did in a lot of areas, of course. But yeah, so we got the 7:30-ish, we got the connection with Egypt, and then again that same day in the evening, the stars were just full of, I mean, we're not talking one or two, we're talking like you could see like Orion, as it were. But the difference between that and the actual Orion was this one was moving across the sky. It was literally these displays were showing you constellations. across the sky.
And you said you had, excuse me, you said you had your own camera. Was that a video camera? And is that captured?
That was part and parcel. I've got the still of that, and I've got some of the shots of the night sky, but they weren't as good as the videos that survived. The bits that I've got are much better, even though they've gone through that. And you know, like when you get the two heads that are off on the VHS things, you
Yeah,
get this like snow lines and all the rest of it. But
yeah,
there's enough clear stuff in there for even the viewer today to go, holy shit. You know, there are like those 3-4 second glimpses. It's not just in, out, in, out. There are like, oh, you can watch it for about 5-6 seconds and then it fizzles. Very difficult to catch the night sky stuff with the cameras that were around in 96 because they just didn't have the ISO
yeah.
to be able to do that. And now I'm sure that the TV cameras were much better equipped at that point in time. But again, unfortunately, he wasn't, I didn't get any of that footage at the end of the day. And that documentary never happened. And yet we were recording for 2 weeks.
Did you ever go back to Carlos or anybody over there, or even the translator? Well, no, the translator wouldn't have been able to help you, but to see whatever happened to that footage and to see whether there was any way you could get access to it.
I sent a few emails straight after I got back when I found out what the situation was. And basically, after the first email saying, I I've given all the material to our powers to be, as it were. He said, and I don't have access to it anymore. And that was the upshot. And then I sent another couple of emails about a month later, and I just didn't get any more replies.
Mm.
So I guess he was told to cut all the ties.
Oh, bloody shame.
It was, but yeah, it's all real and it all happened. It was all documented, and it was documented again when I got back to the UK in UFO Reality. And in the second part, I did actually have the photograph that I'd taken of the Sphinx facing east in the morning of the pyroclastic flow. And even John Terry said, "Oh my God," he said, "How the hell?" I said, to this day, John, I said, I don't know, but I'm glad we put the previous ones in, and I'm glad we put part 2 in, because now I don't look like an idiot.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean I can explain it, because
yeah.
I just can't.
There's obviously a bigger meaning for all of that. And it was channeled for a reason, and it was channeled so there was a lot of eyes on that at the time. And unfortunately, the video footage has been kept away. But what was actually happening in those moments? What did that mean for the planet? What did that mean for human beings or any life on this planet? Or what did it mean for the galaxy and the whole universe?
Well, I think there is a world suppression of that information,
Yeah.
because and people say, well, why don't we get disclosure from UFOs and this, that, and the other? Well, it's not. It's we bandy that word around UFOs as if it's a packet of crisps. It's much more than that, and it's not only about evil greys trying to take over the world or this, that, and the other. Okay, those are the stories that sell on TV. But from what my experience was in Mexico, especially, showed the other side, which was there are entities that could help take mankind so far forward beyond the capitalist system of greed-driven economy, and that's what's really being suppressed, because they have the energy means. They are what they call like a third state civilization, where they've managed to enhance all the energy requirements they could possibly ever need, and may be willing to share it, and they're trying to get the message out, and it's being suppressed to every single angle. Because if you think about it, going back to the triangle on Salisbury Plain, if they're sitting there with anti-gravity, then irrespective of what your thoughts are on that subject at all, or whatever, is it literally shows, well, they're suppressing anti-gravity and everything that connects to that, or the ability to have that. And because it's man-made, it's clearly not beyond our capability, even now.
Yeah.
And that's back in 97. So the question then becomes is, Well, you don't really need to ask why we're suppressing stuff on UFOs then, do you? Because it's to maintain the existing slave system of capitalism, which is what it is, all right? Because they certainly don't want the status quo from changing, because those in charge are living the life of Harry is, living a fantastic life, and the rest of us are feeding it.
Yeah, and it's the same as the medbed stuff. If you believe in the medbeds, that the technology that created those apparently is other planetary, and it's been suppressed here. This technology is here, but we just haven't got access to it. So,
Yeah. Although you can make your own pretty easily.
and yeah,
Oh, yeah. That's for another day, but we're good.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I've got the blueprints, and I've also got the frequency generators and all the rest of it. So and it's been used. It's like the hint in things like Stargate, the TV series and stuff like that, where they come out, oh, that's a sarcophagus. And what is the definition of a sarcophagus? It's where you put someone to bury them. No, the definition of a sarcophagus is actually it's a box that somebody goes in to rejuvenate and then comes back out of. It's not a coffin, and it's as simple as that. I've got a couple of episodes that I'm working on at the moment for my Rumble channel, and one of them explains a little further the links between the Ark of the Covenant and the King's Chamber.
Okay.
And the energy system that was once there. And it makes sense. It's not esoterical. Because the science is there and the evidence for the science is there. And this is the stuff that's being suppressed. And like I've said on my videos before about like the lost city of Atlantis, I said, you think Atlantis sunk? I said, it didn't. It descended. There is a difference. One they're in control of and the other they're not. I said, and believe me when I tell you, they're in control. So they didn't sink because of chaos. They descended to avoid the chaos. Big difference, but same results. So it's entirely how one would interpret those results. Oh, and Atlantis sunk into the ocean. What makes you think it sunk like a ship? Well, because it went down. That's basing on your limited view of the world and technology. Let's say it descended just like you see in the TV series Atlantis. And then if you look at where Plato said Atlantis was and then ask yourself, well, why is there only 33 degrees in the Masonic levels? Well, because if you go to 33 by 33 longitude and latitude, guess where you end up? Smack bang on the same spot that Plato said Atlantis was. Oh, what a coincidence. 33 degrees by 33 degrees, and you're going through the Straits of Gibraltar or the Pillars of Hercules, and boom, there's the sacred knowledge of Atlantis. So I don't know why people are running around the world looking for it. The address has been in front of everybody for hundreds of years. Things, and to me, that kind of like connecting those dots might not necessarily ever be provable, but they still seem obvious to me when I'm looking at stuff and I see those patterns and go, well, hang on a second. What if the 33rd degrees of Mason is actually degrees rather than a stepping stone system? Let's have a look. Where do we end up? I mean, my jaw dropped when I looked at it and then I put it into, like Google Earth and it went boom. And I'm like, you are kidding me. How obvious. Wow. Literally. And isn't it funny that when you draw a line right down the center of the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's on 33 degrees. Wake up, people. Wow. But yeah, there's lots and lots of things that fly around this confused mind of mine.
Wow, it's a very curious mind, which we established on the first
I love curiosity.
First podcast.
Everyone should be curious.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of your core values and core strengths. Well, we're over the hour quite a bit. And yes, we didn't get into anything else, entities. So there's definitely an opening for another one, Rob. The one thing that I just was trying to get clear in my mind while you were talking before we sort of wrap up a little bit. So you were brought in to see those military men as your hypnosis skills, your counseling skills,
Yeah.
but you were also then so when you got put into that article, was that the first time you were ever involved in any kind of UFO editorial?
No, no, no. Um, I mean, John pulled me in because he knew my background. Um, and I used to work with, again, some of your older viewers might know, he's passed away now, but I used to work with Bud Hopkins, my American counterpart. And Bud Hopkins, he brought his book out about abductions and did a very famous case in New York, which is still debatable. But I can't fault Bud Hopkins' um, drive, passion, and ideas for what he did. But he, to me, Bud, he pioneered the forensic approach to hypnosis. Although in the later days, I kind of, I tended to keep it a lot cleaner than Bud, because Bud's passion got the better of him on a lot of occasions, and he would make suggestions without realizing it in the questions he was asking. Whereas I was, and then what happened, and I would stick strictly to a clean slate, as it were, because I didn't want anyone accusing me of creating false memories.
Yeah, yeah.
So when they heard or read the transcript, they could see, well, he didn't suggest anything.
Mm.
You know, like he could say there was a figure. Okay, so how tall were these two figures? Well, he said there was a figure. You just said there were two. You know, little things like that that make certain suggestions. You know, what color hair they have. Well, you're assuming they've got hair. He didn't mention hair.
Mm.
You know, and things like that. And I was always very careful not to do that. But because of my work in the Institute of Clinical Hypnosis, which was my background at the time, um, in the early days, I'd said to John, you know, look, this is my background. I've already run lots and lots of sessions because I was curious about people who claim they were abducted. You know, it was just an area I was interested in.
Right.
I said, I'll be honest with you, John. I said 97% of them is all bullshit. You know, it's a Me Too thing. You know, but I said there is that small percentage though that really intrigues me. You know, and then John got back to me. He said, I like the way you think. He said, because you're not just diving in and believing everybody. I said, no. I said, you know, that would be stupid. You know, people just want to jump on the bandwagon, and it's up to me to try and filter as best I can the ones that I believe have got a story to tell, and the other ones that are telling a story. You know, and so that's when I started working for uh, the magazine on a part-time basis, in amongst obviously my other work. But that was just, and because I was working for the magazine, that then got me onto
Yeah.
the circuit, as it were,
Yeah, the other
of,
stuff. Yeah.
of presenting UFOs at conferences and all that kind of stuff, and built up a network with like the likes of Bud Hopkins. I mean, David Icke's been around my house for tea with his wife, and I've shared the stage with David on many occasions. Even had an argument with him on one of them, but but you get to know lots and lots of people. And then of course when I started the YouTube channel, I kind of like, it'd been quite a few years anyway, because I went into the corporate sector and did leadership stuff and had what I would call a more normal life. But then quickly got fed up with the corporate sector. I say quickly, it took quite a few years, but I got to a level where I was disagreeing with heads of department in how they were manipulating the employees. It was, to me, it was morally wrong, but to them it was profit driven.
Yeah.
So therefore that was the justification, and I just couldn't. I said, no, I'm not doing that, because my forte was in hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, psychology, and all the rest of it. So yeah, you know, you could sell sand to the Arabs and give them techniques to do all sorts of things, and I wasn't willing to do that, because it was like a baby chewing a razor blade. You know, it's like, no, it's like anything else. With great knowledge comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, and look, I used to do hypnosis for fun, for therapy, and entertainment. That's it. If it ever harmed anybody, I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
You know, or you were using it to take advantage of somebody's vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
That's abhorrent to me, because for you to be for someone to ask you to hypnotize them in order to help them is the greatest trust anybody else can give. And if you abuse that, then you're not worth the air that you're breathing. It's, to me, it's black and white.
Yeah.
There is no middle ground, you know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's other things that you've done. I mean, you've done so many different things.
I was there at the fall of the Berlin Wall.
God.
I was actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I've done a few bits and pieces and
You've
whatnot.
done a few things. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing those amazing stories. Remind everybody where they can find you now, Rob.
So now, and you've got my link anyway, but I'm over on my Rumble channel, and obviously with Christmas coming up, I do have one more episode with Grumpy Gumshoe coming up, putting the world to rights. I saw it. He's going to beat me up now for calling him Grumpy Gumshoe. But yeah, I do upload on a weekly basis again, and I'm getting a little bit more diverse. There is some legal stuff up there, but I am expanding, what I'm talking about as well. And there is going to be a very interesting episode early in the new year about the pyramids that you probably haven't heard or seen before.
Mm.
So the connection between the Book of Exodus and the Great Pyramid, I don't think has been explored quite enough.
Okay.
You shall
Interesting.
see.
Very good. Okay, cool. And I like to finish these conversations with anything, that you feel cool to share before we wrap up, if there's anything you want to share.
Well, I think I share around about this time of year is that it's not about the festive season, about being good to anybody. It's about trying to be good to yourself and that inner speak for the rest of the year. Because for me, the idea of law of attraction works on the inner speak, not the outer words or actions. And that's the bit that people have really got. I mean, as I said to someone, the greatest practice you can do over Christmas to get yourself the other switch is to consciously leave out can't, won't, shouldn't, and all of those negative words. If you consciously make an effort not to think or say those in your conversations, and it's difficult at first, but in a week from now, you will be solution positive based thinking. You would have reprogrammed yourself inside a week. So give it your best shot and give that as a Christmas present to yourself.
Oh, perfect. Love that. Love that. I mean, we're also terrible. I do it myself, call myself a dickhead. Oh, you silly cow. What have you done? You do it and it just rolls off your tongue you wouldn't talk to other people like that. Why talk
No,
to yourself like that? So
exactly. One of the worst things that nobody ever talks about in society is mental self-abuse, and it
yeah,
has to stop.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Rob. This has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. And there's so much more to explore with you. So there's going to be a part three, I think, in the new year at some point, if Rob's agreeable to that.
No
And
problem. Viewer led, of course.
yes, yes. But thank you again and have a fantastic